This is Adam Simbeye with This Week in Perspective. The economy of Tanzania is reported to be doing well. How well is always the big question being asked in all sectors involved with development. What exactly is the current status of the economy and its performance as well as growth amid some difficult situations globally? To try and discuss this issue today and probably answer some of these and other relevant questions with me today are two very able panelists. Dr. Blandina Kilama from REPOA, left Gilead Terry from the Tanzania Private Sector Foundation. Welcome to the program, lady and gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Viewers, for the first time I have two panelists on the program, but I know they're very capable of responding to the issues that are on the table for discussion. The two possible panelists have given reasons due to circumstances beyond their control. They are not able to participate. That's like Bella Bird, the World Bank country representative, and Dr. Semboja, who suddenly realized that he has to go to Mbeya. So we're doing with the two panelists here. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
So let's start with the very first question, and I'm sure you have plenty of time to respond to this because there are only two of you. Do I start with you, Dr. Blandina Kilama, and then Gilead will come in. What is the current status of the country's economy? Is it healthy and is it doing well?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for having me as part of the panel. And I think, as you rightly point out, I hope we're going to make it interesting and try to capture the different issues around our economy. So to start up with, what is the current status of the Tanzania economy? And here I'd like to refer to the recently released national accounts by the National Bureau of Statistics. If you look in its totality, the economy has been growing. Activities around agriculture, industry, and also in services have also been growing, but they've been growing a little bit slowly than in previous times. Now, when you speak about the status of the economy, there are different ways, and I'm sure Gilead will share a little bit later, to look at it. So we can look either into activities, we could either look into the incomes that are coming into the country, or we could look at the costs that are associated in the economy. So in particular, I like this approach of just looking at the activities that are within these three different subsectors in the economy. So when it comes to agriculture, if you look at like the biggest contribution in agriculture has continued to be crops. And we are seeing pretty much the same levels. And then the next bit, industry, what we are seeing now is, and when I say similar levels, it's around close to 30%, not really hitting it, but close to 30%. And then if you move into industry, you're seeing the same thing. But then when it comes to industry, the main contributor, the first one, is around construction. But this level has fallen from the figures that we had in 2015 to the figures we're having now in 2016. If you look more recently at the figures that are released for the first quarter and the second quarter, so the first half of the year, you're seeing, now I move to growth, you're seeing the growth figures have changed a little bit. Now I want to put a context in this. Globally, we're seeing the same trend, that things have been slowed down. And thanks also to the NBS, like they were showing also around East Africa, actually Tanzania's growth is actually performing better than all the others. So from like Rwanda is actually within the East African region. So like Rwanda is actually performing a little bit worse. Slower, growing more slowly. All countries are growing, but at a slower growth than they had before. If you look at Burundi, Kenya, Uganda, it's pretty much the same thing. So I think most of the discussion that we're going to have here needs to take that in context. Like, yes, we are seeing a slowdown globally. We are seeing a slowdown within East Africa, and we are seeing also some slowdown in Tanzania, but all countries are still growing. Now, I'll give an example in as much as we're speaking about this is a macro discussion, just to put a context so that we understand. I can pick any brand of water just to make my example easy. So let's say an economy of Tanzania equals to 10 bottles of water. It doesn't matter what volume or who makes them. So let's say it's just 10. So next year, okay, Tanzania produces 12 bottles. Okay, so Tanzania has grown a bit. Okay, but let's say
by 2 bottles.
Yes, by 2 bottles. Yes, we can speak like that. So by 2 bottles. Yeah. So let's say we got to Kenya, and let's say the economy of Kenya is equivalent to 15 bottles. But then next year, let's say Kenya also added 2 bottles. Yes. So Tanzania has 10 bottles before, and then it added 2, so now it has 12. Kenya had 15, but now adds 2. So both economies have grown, but Tanzania have grown a little bit more, or should you say a little bit faster than Kenya.
Because it had less.
Yes, so that's the perspective of any country that you want to pick. So if we pick, let's say, China, or we want to pick US, we'll say, and in most cases in discussion, when we're talking about growth, that's what we're saying, and the economy of the size of the US, so it will be like the 10 bottles we're talking about in Tanzania will be like 1 million times those bottles, okay? So how many more would they add? If US simply adds 2 bottles, it's not going to be sin, you know? So I wanted to bring that out so that we understand when we're talking about growth, what do we really mean? Yes. And in most cases, it is adding those bottles. So when we are saying a sector, let's say in agriculture, has grown a little bit, we are referring to that. And if we are saying agriculture actually is employing close to 60% of the population, meaning 6 out of 10 people are working in agriculture, it's not necessarily, when it comes to that particular economy, now let's go back to the 12 bottles I'm talking about. In Tanzania, you have agriculture only bringing in about, as a big 3 to 4 bottles of the 12. Only 3 to 4 coming to agriculture. Though the people who are employed in agriculture, we have 6 and 10. So I think when we're speaking about the economy of Tanzania in general, it is good to have that. And I think I start with that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Gilead.
Yes.
What's your take on this?
Yeah. I think the statisticians as well as the economists have sort of broken it down quite well in terms of the recent report by the Bank of Tanzania about the fundamentals of the economy, as well as the recent report by the National Bureau of Statistics. So we have quite stable money supply. We have quite stable inflation. In fact, we have been doing quite well in terms of taming inflation. We have increased a little bit our debt to GDP ratio, which is still hasn't reached a very dangerous and critical stage, arguably. And that element for us, the private sector, is a very good thing. So if we look from that point of view, we are seeing quite a very open and a very stable economy, which is quite a good place to invest. But the second element, which is also very, very important to look into, is that for the last 2 years and perhaps also many years back, we have had a very stable sort of government system, as well as peace and stability, which is also a quite important factor for people to open their businesses in the morning. Because you can't really...
Why in the morning?
I mean, you can't really open a business in the morning while there are a whole lot of demonstrations happening in the streets, and it's quite unstable. Oh, exactly. So when you have a very conducive and a very stable and a very secure and safe country, yeah, it is quite another important indicator that there is something going right in that particular economy. But I think the third area, which could be quite defining from the private sector in terms of health of the economy, we look at the areas where there is, or at least the money that the private sector invests, they account for a larger portion of it. And these are three particular areas. One area is labor, another is energy, and another area is rents. So rents, yeah. So if you want to look into the economy, for example, someone is trying to come from a foreign country and trying to come and invest in Tanzania, and they want to understand how our economy is doing. First, you look at the people. I mean, are we able to get good quality people into the labor force? Are we able to get cheap and affordable energy if we want to start industries tomorrow morning? But the third element, the rents, they are affordable. We are hearing some of the African countries are finding it quite hard to attract foreign investments, partly because of being very expensive places to stay. I mean, Luanda in Angola being one of case in point. But
Luanda and Angola?
Luanda, Angola, the capital of Angola is quite...
And yet the other reports are saying Rwanda is doing well.
Luanda, the capital of Angola.
Yeah,
yes,
Rwanda,
yes,
yeah,
Luanda in
sorry.
Angola. Yes.
So that's what it is, Rwanda.
Yeah. So that is one area to look into it. And I think for a case of Tanzania, we have a challenge in skills. It is still very expensive to get quality people into Tanzania, not only because of sometimes challenges of residence permit for foreigners, but also our education system has not been able to produce the quality labor force needed in the market. If we are to move into a middle income economy, we need around 12% of quality labor force. At the moment, we are at around 3%.
Just on that point,
yeah.
There was a recent either conference or symposium at the University of Dar es Salaam, which is calling for review or reform of our education system to be able to cope with the policy of industrialization, so that we can have the adequate and well-trained human capital.
Yeah. And that is very, very important. We at TPSF, we're trying to work with the Ministry of Labor to undertake a very extensive skills development program, which we hope will partly be important in addressing that problem. But the issue of energy is also very crucial. I mean, we have had a very stable energy supply at the moment with the current phase government, of which is quite encouraging.
Except the last few days.
True.
Been in the dark.
Very true. But we need to understand how we are going to get the 10,000 megawatts that we need for the industries before 2025. And there has not been very clear direction on the side of government with this particular sector. There are initiatives happening, including the Stigler's Gorge, which is quite an impressive move, but that adds around 2,000 megawatts. You know, the 8,000 megawatts, there is so much potential from the private sector to invest into this particular space, and we need the government to open up dialogue in this particular area.
What is the minimum capacity that the industry would require in terms of energy supply?
I mean, the current estimations is that we need 10,000 megawatts by 2025, and we need
increasing
gradually. And for the next 10 years, we need to be adding at least 1,000 to 2,000 megawatts each year. And there are a couple of projects that are happening within that space, especially from private sector developers, being them local or foreigners. And there has been very slow pace in trying to integrate that into the national grid. And I think there should be efforts in that area. The last bit is about rent, and which is good. Now the challenge with rent is we look at it from different ways. So for example, we at the Private Sector Foundation, we think that rents, when they go up, they encourage property developers and investors in the real estate sector. But when they are too high, they discourage SMEs to operate formally. So for example, if I'm coming out of a university, I'm trying to establish a new industry, when there is so much, it is so much expensive to get a piece of a square meter in an office, I'd probably operate from my own home or from my own car or from a restaurant, which is partly an informal sector. And we are currently seeing falling rent prices from, we used to have $20, $25 per square meters. Now in some of the areas it's down up to $8.
Oh,
So
that's a very dramatic.
it's a very dramatic drop. So it's good for the SMEs that they will come into the sector and they are able to access offices, affordably and become formal. But for the property developers, it's a challenge. So it is one of those, which side do you pick?
Yes.
And we think it's good for the small guys, for the SMEs. So if we look in those 3 particular areas, we are seeing some encouraging signs where a small person who is trying to get into business, who is trying to establish themselves in the country, at least they have a shot on how to start. And I think this is quite crucial. The other element maybe would be business environment, which
It seems to be very crucial. I mean, every year.
It is.
In every program when we discuss about doing business in Tanzania,
Yeah.
that comes up. Huh?
Yeah, yeah, and in business environment, it is a challenge. So I'll put it in context. I personally think that since President Magufuli came into power, we have done quite considerably well in trying to address some business environment challenges, especially in the issue of regulation and multiplicity of, for example, taxes and fees.
And the whole multiplicity of the process one has to go through.
Exactly. And it is not an accomplished work. It is still work in progress. But I think from where we are sitting at TPSF, when we engage with our colleagues at President's Office, Prime Minister's Office, as well as the Ministry of Industries and Trade, we are seeing a lot of positive trajectory towards addressing that issue. I mean, there have been an abolishing of, for example, fees from NEMC, which would definitely be a lot of challenge for people trying to set up new businesses.
That's forgetting what there's a report which you have to get.
The environmental impact assessment. Yes. And we think it's good progress. But there are still challenges in that area. I mean, that's a very small bit. I mean, when you talk about people who, for example, want to pay taxes today, it's still very, very complicated. That's why we have around 60% of the private sector operating either informal or quasi-informal, which is quite a huge number. We have only around 100,000 taxpayers in a country of 24 million workforce. And
the majority of the bulk of this is the public servants.
Exactly.
Pay as
well. Exactly. And we think that it is important to improve on the processes so that at least they help the formal economy. I gave an example a few weeks somewhere that today, for example, if you and I are employed and we are trying to set up a business, we'd probably need to go to the secretary or the chairman of the street that you stay, mtendaji wa mtaa, to get your ID or to get your confirmation that you probably live in that particular area. For most of these areas, they don't function 24/7. They don't work 8 to 5. They work at least twice a week. So if I go on Monday and I don't find them, I have to leave my day work, to actually go chase for this particular piece of paper. And we are wondering if this could be reduced. I mean, if you have a driving license, or you have another ID, you have a passport. I mean, there should be a process.
ID.
Exactly, a national ID. There should be a reduction in all these processes. And I think once we improve that, there will be a good direction in the health of our economy, because even the business environment is part of the pulse of how healthy our economy is, and we need to improve on that.
But by the way, while you're still on, has the tax base been expanded? You were talking about a 100, is it? 1 million, 150 something?
Yeah.
People who are paying the tax?
I mean, I think on the issue of taxes, it is a big challenge, and it is a challenge in two ways. Our colleagues from the Revenue Authority have always, I think, a decision to make, whether to go for a whole lot of taxes with few players, or to go for small bits of taxes to a whole lot of players. And I think in terms of numbers, it is always favorable for them to go for the big guys, where you just go one place and collect a whole lot. And I think this is what's harming our tax expansion. So I'll give an example. I mean, recently, the government is charging excise duty for all products, I mean, water, beer, you name it. And there has been a move to introduce a new electronic tax stamp. I mean, previously a tax stamp would be, given to a particular range of products, but this time around, they want to make sure that any product that it is being produced has an electronic tax stamp.
How about those products?
And even imported as well. So bonded warehouses would be responsible to make sure that this tax stamp goes through, which is a very good thing, because it guarantees sort of quality of the product, make sure that there are very few counterfeits and stuff like that. But when you introduce these tax stamp, and then you pass on the cost to the manufacturer, it is seen as another tax, for example. So, for example, for cigarette manufacturers, where their excise duty is around 56 shillings per cigarette, and then one cigarette. Stick. Yeah. So now you have a tax stamp, which it is charged at $10.1 for 1,000 products, which translate to 23,000, which if you put for 1,000 products is 23 shillings per product. Half of the excise duty that is on the cigarette, it becomes quite expensive. It's like 50% of the excise tax on top. And we think that these are the things in terms of fiscal policy that really affects the whole doing business environment. I mean, no one does not want the government to move from manual systems to electronic systems, but that should be done consistently in a way that does not affect the companies and those doing production and those doing business, because they pay the taxes, then they employ, then they provide revenues and incomes in the economy, and this whole contributes to the health of the economy.
But by and large, there are positive, in your view.
Exactly.
Positive moves.
A whole lot of good positive moves, as I mentioned, business regulations in terms of NEMC. Now, if we go to BRELA, it takes you a day to register a business, and we think it's quite positive and very good move. We just have to make sure that those businesses that get registered, they survive in the game. And how they survive is you have a very conducive business environment for them to play. And I think our economy now needs to focus on that, making sure that everyone who is in the market is able to play and make money and pay the government as well, pay their people, and grow the economy and grow the bottles that we want to have, not just two, but if we can double every time, then it's good.
Block the privileges for
Exactly.
people to get away without paying tax.
Definitely.
Okay. Before I come to you again, I think let me ask Gilead.
Yeah.
I understood all along as a non-economist that one of the signs to indicate, or one of the indicators of an economy which is growing, is healthy, is in the construction industry. When you see buildings coming up, I mean, skyscrapers and whatever, then you conclude or you assume that the economy is doing well. Is that the case?
I think that is one of the indicators. There is usually another challenge, though, with just real estate and construction sector itself. If that construction is happening in major means of production in the economy, then it's good. I mean, if we're building airports and we're building roads and we're building ports, that's a good sign. When we are building apartment blocks that very few class of citizen in an economy can afford, that's a sign of income gap, not necessarily growth.
Despite the fact that there is housing demand.
Yes.
For everybody.
No, I completely agree. But I mean, when the biggest increase is on the upper echelon, where people can pay $2,000, $3,000 kind of rentals, and you have 80% of the economy, 90% of the economy living below $10 to $20 a day, it becomes a growth of a certain group and not broad-based. So it is growth, but the growth that we would like to see for a country like Tanzania is one that is broad-based, where even the folks in the village would be able to afford building materials, and they could be able to build affordable houses.
For the young upcoming citizens
Yes.
from the university or training institutions who look for a place to stay.
Yes.
All right. Blandina,
Yes.
if the economy is performing well, does Tanzania need to have an even higher growth, and why?
That's a good question, and I think it links to where we started and a lot of things that Gilead just said. So you do want your economy to grow because of the different things that are linked to when your economy is growing. So as Gilead was giving all those different examples, so if we say the growth of Tanzania is around 6 to 7%, and a big chunk of it is coming from agriculture, where a lot of people are employed, then we'd be like, oh, this is good. So it's one thing to look at that big figure, but it's something else to really focus as to where is this growth coming from. So if it's growing in areas where you have a lot of people, it means then these people will also have money. They will demand more goods. They will demand for more services. And not just services, maybe even better services. They can even question the services that they're receiving. But if the growth is not in the areas where you have the majority, then you will have, you will need a lot of effort to get them out. And so you will end up having programs that need to take care of everybody who is being left behind because the growth itself is not broad-based. And so when we are saying, or when we're talking about wanting to have the high growth, what we mean is we want that is the one that is broad-based, because we say if it's only focusing in areas that are capital intensive, then there are people who are going to be left out. Because a machine can do maybe a work that can be, a machine can work 24 hours and can do work maybe for 24 or 25 people or 100. Yeah, so that's what we're saying. If that particular thing that you want, the growth that engages labor intensive, that's the kind that we want, then it's a good growth. Because then all these people who are engaged in the labor intensive are the ones that can access all these services. But if it's the machine, then okay, they won't be accessing all this other. But then they will need just the environment to support
the machine
that.
can break down. So as the human being, they fall sick, they get the absenteeism and all this. So which would you prefer? A machine which can be repaired, you get spare parts and go on for 24 hours, or somebody who falls sick and is absent. So 24 hours, 2 days, you lose business out of that. No?
I like that question because it's like, which kind of business do you like? Do you want to show up at work every day, or do you want to make sure there is money entering your account even when you're sick? That is a totally kind of like a different kind of question.
Yes.
So what we know in quite a number of African countries, our growth, unfortunately, is coming through the industries that are employing less. In Asia, the likes of Vietnam and Thailand, they've shown, and Indonesia also, you have quite a lot of labor-intensive kind of like encouragement that is boosting their economy. And so what you're saying is correct. So we need to have that here. Okay. Or otherwise, the figures that Gilead was sharing, we will continue to have a lot of people who cannot afford to move ahead and better their lives. So that's why you will end up hearing, or maybe we are used of hearing this phrase, oh, the economy is doing well, except my pockets. And that is not the phrase you want. If it's broad-based, then everybody will say, yes, the economy is doing well, including my pockets. And that's where we want to aim. So to do that, then, it means not only do we want to have to maintain the macroeconomic stability, the pricing that Gilead spoke very well, the inflation bits, making sure you have also the long run and short run interest rates that are okay, and also the exchange rates, so that the businesses can operate. And we know it's the businesses that are going to create a lot of jobs. Because at the end of the day, when you're speaking about the health economy, it means a lot of people have work and they can continue to have work. If they can't, then you have a problem around unemployment. And that is not good for your economy also, because you have to also check on that. So when you're thinking around making sure, like the private sector, and I like a lot of things that he said around the business environment and making sure that the private sector is at the front, our second 5-year development plan says that. Like, we need the private sector to take the central role.
Which has been presented, as it worked on in Bunge recently.
Yeah, so that's the second bits of the second 5 year. Yeah, because it's 5 years. So now it's the second bits that we're discussing the guidelines on how the good should make the budget and so on and so forth. So it's one thing to have that, but then making sure you're having an environment that encourages private financing. So it's one thing for the government to say, this is what we want, and we want the private sector to take the central role, okay? In any of the projects, are we also is it possible to have private financing? That's one. When we say we want the private sector as the main actor in
they call themselves engine of
So when we say that, what do we really mean? It's good there are lots of efforts in reducing overregulation, because for them to operate, they need to operate in a competitive way. And as Gellert said, you need all this the labor that is required with enough skills. If you don't have that labor, then it makes it very difficult to have your the labor-intensive kind of like approach that you want. And then you were like, no, it's easy just to bring a machine, because they're like, no, it'll take me a very long time to train all these people. But then all this is not like we only train people in this particular way. No, it's in small bits and pieces that people can undertake something, and you're like, yes, I do have the capacity to do this particular work very well. But if you're not putting any effort around that, it means the conference you're citing and a lot of other work that I've done, we will continue to cite them and nothing is happening. And I don't think for a healthy economy, you just want to be citing those examples, but you want to cite all the different improvements that you're hearing. I understand, like the Japanese, the Kaizen kind of like setup that they've tried in several countries, including in Japan, even here in Tanzania, they're trying. You want those done at a larger scale and in a more organized way for you to feel actually you do have a lot of people that are engaged. Because I think sometimes, in as much as the approach we're using in tax, saying, hey, just tax a few intensively and then let's forget the other. I think in a lot of approaches when we're putting intervention, perhaps maybe we're also doing that. So maybe we should also think of, actually really bringing in the masses, because at the end of the day, if they also they're able and willing not only to work, meaning they should also be happy to pay taxes, because they know then they will be paying taxes, and then the budget that is allocated should also allow them to access some services. Now, since I touch a little bit on the budget, then it comes to the question is, it's one thing to collect all the revenue, it's something else to say, this budget is credible. So we have the guidelines, correct. We have the budget, correct. So once we approve that budget, do we have a way of following up, like everything that is said in this budget is being implemented, or do we wait for the CAG to say, oh, no, they did this. So I'm not talking about the CAG.
There should be a continuous monitoring process?
Yes, it's great what the CAG does, but that's like an after thing that has happened. It should be pretty much when they're reporting, it'll be like, in this area we said we'll do this, and then we did 1, 2, 3. The money bits, the way it was spent according to the 1, 2, 3, that should be the kind of transparency that would encourage a lot of people. You know what? I think it's not good to be quasi-informal. I'm using his word. Yes. To be quasi-informal. I think I should be formal. Then I will feel the urge and ease whenever I hear any statement coming from the government, and I can follow it because I'm like, you know what, I'm playing my part. What else is happening from the other side? Yes, as a taxpayer. Then it's easy for you to ask, because if you're not paying taxes, it becomes very difficult to pay.
So you don't care because you don't pay tax.
Exactly, yes. So people should start caring that. It's like these projects you have with the young children. If you want, if you have a big problem, let's say of diarrhea in an area, you have all these WASH programs. If you listen to most of the WASH programs, in as much as they'll speak about putting up the toilets and what have you, they'll say, no. We have to change the mindset and behavior, and they will use the children who are going to school. What do you do before you eat? They'll tell you, I wash my hand. What would you do before you come from a bathroom? I wash my hand. And kids are best. They'll just be like, hey, Dad, I saw you coming out. I didn't see you wash your hands, so things like that. So it's the same thing. So even the kids can already, when they're young, being told about paying taxes and stories around how taxes is used,
and how important is paying tax.
Yes.
And that is an obligation of every single Tanzanian to pay taxes.
Yes.
From the taxes you pay, that's where you get development, I suppose. Yeah. So that kind of education you need to go.
Yeah.
Who will give that education?
So it will be the entire society. So it's not, and I think that's partly what Gilad is saying. When we are having all these initiatives, it should never look like it is the government that just wants the taxes so that they can use it. No, it should be like, it's very important we bring the taxes, then we can get access to all the goods and services that are public, and they are provided publicly. Otherwise, what you're going to see is a lot of public problems. We'll always have these small, little private solutions, just trying to solve them out. But if all of them, they come through the public channel, then it's a little bit easier for them to continue like that. But then, as we say, the economy doesn't work that way always, but you would like to see it heading there. Because, for instance, we've just proved it's quite a little bit possible with the DAT project that is going on. We were complaining about it's very difficult to move around. But now with that, yes, already we're showing like it's possible for some solutions.
The teething problems, of course.
Yes, despite all the different problems and the pricing and everything, but that is one big solution that is there. Now sustaining it, maintaining it, financing it, making sure we are able to debt service every other project we want that is important for the macroeconomy.
How do the people in the rural areas ensure that the money allocated through the district council, the halmashauri's for development in their specific area, is actually going to the right direction for the purposes it was intended? How do they do it?
I remember, I think it was during, was it the third phase government?
Yes.
I think it was Mkappa's time, when they were putting all those notice boards with what was allocated where, and also they were having all these discussions around what kind of things they also wanted. And so it was like a top-down meets bottom-up kind of like approach. So and that was very transparent. So even whatever the CAG report would say at the aggregate level, at all these local levels, they already knew, like, hey, you said you're going to bring this, you only brought that, or you didn't bring it at all. So that was very easy. So people would talk and they will continue to, I think it was a little bit easier also to engage more in implementing different projects that a particular village or a particular ward thought was important.
Accountability and transparency, basic, isn't it?
Yes.
Gilead.
Yes.
Has money transfer services through the mobile phones had an impact? Mobile phone companies had an impact on the performance of the economy and how?
Maybe I'll echo one point from Blandina and then move to that question. I think there has been a law passed. I think it was passed before the former president left office, which now places accountability of public resources to actually the officer responsible for disbursing it. So now if something goes wrong, we can actually catch the people responsible for the wastage of resources that goes to the halmashauris which was quite a commendable move in trying to up the accountability aspect of things. So I think it's also important to tell our viewers and for our listeners to understand that the growth of the Tanzania's economy over the last 5 years, maybe more, maybe 10, I would say, has been driven by primarily 5 sectors, maybe 6. One of them is the real estate and construction sector, which has been consistently growing for over 10%. I think over the last 5 years it averaged 12%, which is quite a good growth that President Magufuli, while he was minister, he managed to oversee that. But the second one was on extractives, and this was heavy investment in mining, which in the early 2000s, but as well quite recently in oil and gas sector. Not only exploration, as well as the infrastructure to extract the oil, the gas from Twara, for example, to Dar es Salaam, which brought in quite huge levels of investments as well as jobs into the country. The third sector that has been growing quite well is transit trade, and this is mainly due to our port of Dar es Salaam, our very strategic location where we can serve our neighbors with our ports and transportation, which is quite a huge factor in growth. Then the financial services, and I think that is quite open. I mean, now it's like branches are opening every other day. And over the last 10 years, it has been quite in the year 2000, and since then, everybody else has transformed as well as followed that suit. And this has fueled growth, and I think that's where an issue of money transfer comes into the picture. So as much as these sectors drive the economy, these are not the largest employers, and I think Dr. Blandina mentioned that quite correctly. The largest employer is agriculture, the largest employer is manufacturing, which, by the way, has also consistently been growing at around 7-8% over the last 10 years. And those are the areas that we need to focus now going forward. So with respect to money transfers, they have sort of brought a revolution in how our society works. A report that I read recently said that mobile money transfer, account for only 1% of the total amount of products that are financial products that are available in the market. But they account for around 89% of the usage and adoption rate.
Okay.
So the amount of services that an average Tanzanian use in the financial services is quite small. It's basically savings through a mobile phone or to a bank account, or transferring money from one person to another. So it is. It tells us something. It tells us that our economy has not been able, or at least our financial sector has not been able to be creative enough to reach a whole lot of people on how they expect to be reached, on how our economy is currently being structured, and this comes not only from mobile money, but on another thing as well. I mean, I read another report that told us that Tanzania has less than, I think, 9 million account holders, account numbers, which is quite a small amount of accounts. Well, you have a bank like Equity Bank, which alone in itself has 12 million account holders in Kenya. And this is another indicator of how still our financial services or our financial sector have not been able to serve our market. So it's still work in progress, and I think a whole lot of actors within this particular sector need to do their homework on how to facilitate or at least provide services that are relevant and consistent to the needs of especially those that live in the rural areas, who are the majority of Tanzanians.
Without weakening the ordinary standard commercial bank. Exactly.
And I think in the long run, in any developed economies, commercial banks will always be there. The only thing, they would probably change their services to back this new system that supports the rural poor. And I think we as the private sector need to work much more on this particular space.
Yes, I mean, I'm surprised. We already consumed a substantial time of our discussion, left with a few minutes, but let's prod on until I'm warned time is up. Brandina,
Yes.
and I know you research a lot on issues of poverty as an individual economist researcher, but as an the organization we present, report. What would explain about 12 million, according to report I heard of the World Bank update, economic update, Tanzanians live in extreme poverty despite the impressive economic performance and this macroeconomic stability?
That's a good question, and I think we touched on it indirectly when you actually teased me about wanting to have more labor-intensive kind of like intervention. So that's a reflection of us failing to do that.
Yes.
Actually, I mean, I think the shortest answer to that would have been that. Like, it's just, unfortunately, our economy, in as much as both of us have said repeatedly, we are having about 6 in 10 people engaged in agriculture. So anytime you're seeing a slow growth in agriculture, it means quite a lot of people are being left out. And so, and we, so far in this discussion, we've been saying the areas that have been growing, it's not around agriculture per se. So meaning a lot of people are being left out, and if they're being left out, meaning they're not getting increased earning. If they're not getting increased earning, they cannot demand more services because already they don't have that particular earning, nor can they demand more goods. So for us, not being able to increase services on that side links again to the earlier point that we've spoken about. It means even the services that they get are not really good. In such a way, you would end up, let's say, even when you're trying to acquire education, in as much as we have free education now for the basic education, you will end up with the kind of like the low type of education, which at the end will only allow you to acquire low skills. And if you have a low skill, again, the sector will go on.
You are unemployable.
Yes.
Or you can.
Or even if you get employment, if you get employment, you will also still again have less earning. So this cycle will continue for a bit.
Thank you, Brandon. You have answered, but now told we have 5 minutes to go. I wanted you to come to more or less conclusion. In your view, very quickly in a few minutes, what are the development challenges of the country's economy, growth and performance? Very quickly.
Yeah. I think there are 2 ways, apart from broad-based growth, that is, should be the first objective. The second one should be private sector development. On the broad-based growth, it is because one thing, there's only 1 or 2 ways to help an economy that is growing quite fast, but has a huge number of people that still live in poverty. The first way to go around it is what we call transfers. It's how you take wealth from people that have a whole lot more and how you give it to people that have less. And this is one through taxation, through providing of services that the people that are poor don't usually get, so healthcare, and that's why the concept of sort of free services come in. And then the third element is usually cash transfers. For example, TASAF has done something similar like that. But on the other side, apart from transfers, is on the sectors, trying to focus on the sectors that could bring you growth, which is manufacturing as well as agriculture. And there's no way you are going to achieve those 2 objectives without the private sector playing a very huge role. And what we would want is to invest in the farms, to invest in the industries, so that we can get all these people that are disenfranchised and left behind back into the economy. And one shocking statistic that I came across quite recently is that between 2006 to 2016, the wealth of an average Tanzanian has grown from around an average of $250 to $490. This is, but those that have $1 million, they've also doubled. 1,000 people
That
to
doesn't
2,000.
me whether you are.
Exactly. And the point that this statistics gives you is that there is a class, or there is a group of people that gets extremely wealthy, and others are left out of that kind of progress. And bridging that is these methods that I'm proposing.
Very quickly.
Okay. So
one or two.
Be just to have competitive men, then we'll have better skills also, and then people will have more earning, and consumption will be better. And with that, then the economy will continue to flourish, because this then will be sustainable. But then if we just pick a certain part of the economy that we want to support without looking at it holistically, then the challenges will continue.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my two panelists. You've done a good job on explaining or analyzing or reviewing the current status of the economy and discussing it. I'm sure the viewers out there will have benefited a lot when they watch the program. And thank you very much for the challenges that you've posed, and I hope the powers that be will follow up and do the needful, particularly the question of the role of the private sector in overall development, the creation of jobs and all this, and why agriculture is important and why we should focus more on agriculture. And I hope agriculture will play a bigger role, a bigger part in our industrialization travel or journey, as it were. So thank you very much, my panelists here. Viewers, we've heard the views of my panelists here. The World Bank Tanzania Economic Update in April this year stated that Tanzania maintained a strong macroeconomic performance despite challenging that the global environment faces. And this economy was averaging at from between 6 to 7% annual real GDP growth for the past decade. But even higher growth is needed to make an impact on the 12 million Tanzanians who still live on less than $1 a day, and we heard from my panelists here. And about 800,000 young people who enter the labor market every year. The update also says in order to achieve higher growth, the country needs to do, at least it pointed to 3 things, and it named them as to maintain macroeconomic stability, have an effective public investment, and introduce structural reforms, including supportive policies to the private sector. That is Gilead baby, private sector investment and growth. There are, of course, challenges to this impressive economic growth. As we've heard from my panelists here, the economic prospects depend on investment in infrastructure, as well as in improving the business environment, the way we do business in this country. We invite investors to come and the processes that they go through to be able to invest. Increasing agriculture productivity and value addition, again, Dr. Kilama referred to it. Improving service delivery to build a healthy and skilled workforce, and managing urbanization, nurturing a vibrant private sector for it to provide employment, believing that only the private sector can create more jobs. The 5th phase administration, viewers, we all believe is certainly focusing on doing these things as it works to promote Tanzania as a medium income industry or country. This is all we have for you today. Until next Sunday, 21 hours, and on Thursday at 15 hours for the repeat program. We have my 2 panels, Dr. Kilama, Gilead Terry, and TBC Television Center crew. Thank you, viewers, and goodbye.